Hello, everyone. This is Walker Bragman, and I'm here with Hilary Turner, who is running for Congress in West Virginia's 3rd District. Ms. Turner, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you, Walker. I'm glad to be here.
So you are one of several candidates who's running. There's a Republican incumbent in your district, so it's sort of anybody's ballgame at this point. Why don't you tell me a little bit about why you're running for Congress?
Right. Okay. So I am a mother, and I have been an activist for over 14 years since I was in high school. Just always been really passionate. In high school, I was in the Young Feminist Alliance, and then in college, started and led a progressive student alliance where we tackled issues from climate change to poverty. And so in the back of my head, I thought, oh, that might be something interesting to do one day. But I just feel like the time is just more and more pressing that we make as much progress on kind of shifting our economy towards a more sustainable economy and tackling climate change. It's becoming ever more pressing of an issue. And as a mother, I'm kind of a unique candidate, and the percentage of women in Congress who have young children is extremely small. So having a baby who's almost 2 years old, it's been a very challenging endeavor to try to run, but I've had a lot of support in it. But the decision to run was partially based on thinking about not just my future, but my child's future. And sometimes, to be quite frank, looking into the future is kind of terrifying if we keep going in such a destructive direction. So for me, it came down to how can I try to influence our society in a better direction? And what can I do? Like, what's the biggest thing that I could do? What's the most I could do?
So it sounds like it's a deeply personal decision for you. That congratulations, by the way, on.
Oh, thank you.
Are the twos really terrible?
It's becoming a bit more challenging. She's not quite 2 yet, but she really likes the no word. But I'm trying to kind of encourage that independence, that free expression of her will. So.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
we have a 2-year-old next door, and
oh, okay.
It sounds challenging.
Yeah, it can be challenging. It requires patience.
So how, obviously running for Congress now is a moral decision, but it's also it also seems like it would be a challenge with the coronavirus pandemic sort of ripping its way through America. So how is your campaign adapting to this new reality?
So it is challenging, and we're focused more at this point on getting our message out online, and especially social media. So we're pouring a bit more time and resources into, creating video content, getting it out on social media.
That's the fairly that's what I've been hearing a lot of from progressive candidates. So just for everyone watching, I have been doing a series of interviews. So if you are interested, you can check out a whole range of progressive candidates. Now, I'm loving this background. Not exactly West Virginia.
It's not. It's okay. I like San Francisco too. I don't know. It just came up automatically.
That's really cool. I
need to switch it to some mountains. I think that would be more appropriate.
Yeah, almost heaven. So you are the only candidate in your race who is running on a Green New Deal, who's running on single payer, on marijuana legalization, and a whole range of progressive issues. I've been going through and looking at your opponents and noticing that you seem to have not only the most progressive plans, but the most detailed outlines of those plans. Can we talk a little bit about that? Why you feel it's so important um, that we have a single payer system, for example, or a Green New Deal we touched on a little bit earlier with why you were running and climate change. But yeah.
Right. And the truth is, I'm running for a lot of reasons. I think our biggest existential threat ahead is climate change, but I have been passionate about universal healthcare and, switching to universal healthcare in America for a long time. And to me, that's just a matter of saving lives. It's a moral issue. I've in my youth been blessed to be able to travel to other countries, and almost everywhere that I went, they had some public option, and and I can just see it. I mean, it saves lives. That I don't know if you saw that study that came out of Yale I think it was this year, that universal or Medicare for all in America would save 68,000 lives a year.
I
And it would
remember
save,
seeing something about this.
yeah, and it would also save the United States $450 billion a year. So it makes sense economically, and it also, to me, makes sense morally. If we can save lives, if we're the richest country in the world, why aren't we doing it?
Do you think that the coronavirus pandemic has made the case easier for Medicare for all?
Absolutely. Uh, immediately when this whole thing broke out, um, the conversation just shifted, and people started saying, actually, it does make sense to just provide healthcare for everyone, because we are all in this boat together. And um, even with a situation like a very contagious virus like this, the more healthcare that we have that makes sense, like testing and masks and
Right. The
everything
more
like
public
that.
infrastructure we have, the
Right. It actually, it saves lives for the patients, but it also helps to stop the spread. So it's like we are all in the same boat.
now you mentioned that on the Ballotpedia survey, people that you look up to in DC, and you included Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah.
Um, you would be joining her, assuming that you get the nomination and then you are able to win the office. You would be joining as a member of the squad. Um,
Right.
is is the so my question is the prospect of that that's sort of daunting, I guess, right? Like you would be joining your heroes. Um,
Right. Yeah, it can be a little daunting sometimes. Um, but it's also very exciting. I have so much respect for AOC and everything that she's done as kind of a trailblazer for young women in Congress. And I would love to be able to work with her and to craft policy together. And I know that we come from very different backgrounds, but hold so many of the same values. So it would be great to put our heads together and kind of problem solve for America.
um, so I want to talk a little bit more about the coronavirus pandemic because I do think it is one the most pressing uh, thing that we're facing in the immediate, and two because I mean really it has exposed all of the holes in our system that I think the left has been calling out for decades, and now we see them in real time. Uh, and
Just playing out.
yeah, and so uh, as somebody who is running for Congress in a state like West Virginia, how do you make the case to conservative voters who for decades have been hearing small government rhetoric, big government bad? How do you make the case that we need a stronger federal response now in your district?
That's a great question. Bringing it to my district, to Southern West Virginia, just to give you a little bit more background about our state. West Virginia right now is the poorest state in the country. We struggle in a lot of indicators. Health is one of them. We have a huge crisis with, diabetes. We have higher cancer rates than most of the country. We have a huge opioid epidemic here that you might be familiar with. I live in Huntington, which is the heart of that
Oh, wow.
opioid epidemic, and it is heartbreaking to see that on the streets, just driving downtown. I think that it's clear to a lot of people here that our healthcare system as a whole isn't working for thousands of people. It's not working for us here. And we also have, a high number of families in medical debt, and almost everyone knows someone who is really struggling with medical issues or medical debt. And so I think we can begin that conversation by bringing it to that human level of, look, we're struggling, our neighbors are struggling.
And you mentioned you see it downtown. Do you so tell me, who do you know that is, I mean, not obviously without naming names, but like some of the stories that you've heard, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'll tell you just actually really, really personal. My sister, and she was actually living in Florida, so Florida actually has a bigger opioid crisis than West Virginia. West Virginia is second to Florida, but my sister last July overdosed from heroin, and that probably started from pain pills. And so that's something, like the pain of that we've felt in my family. Talking to other people, I'm thinking of one woman who, her son is still alive, but is just in and out of rehab, and she's just like, she just seemed really emotionally exhausted from that whole process, of feeling like she lost him as far as being able to connect. And
You have a different approach to this crisis than your opponents. I mean, you're much more on the legalize, decriminalize, and one of your opponents has in their on their website, in the section about the opioid crisis, they lead with arrests. Like, we need to arrest, prevent, and treat, or arrest, treat, and prevent. Do you think that I mean, obviously you don't think that approach is going to work?
No, I think that probably just makes the problem worse, to treat people like criminals, to put them in jail, to make their life situation more difficult. I view addiction as a medical issue. And I think that, we need more comprehensive health care in the United States. We need comprehensive mental health care to be preventing us from getting to that point of addiction. And in some ways, addictions also, I see it as a byproduct of poverty as well. So we have to address our poverty. We have to address healthcare as prevention for our population, getting to these levels of desperation where they want an escape. And then when you get to the point of addiction, it is a medical issue, and you can treat it with medical approaches and not try to ruin the rest of these people's lives because they went through a rough patch.
It's interesting to hear you talk about this, because I think the left has been slowly trying to, or building a case, and I saw Naomi Klein this year talking about this in Brooklyn. but how the left is trying to connect all of these issues that we traditionally treat as separate,
Mhm.
addiction, poverty, the climate, all into one agenda that allows that gives everybody sort of a stake in this big platform approach. Um, and that platform, obviously, I see it on your website. um, so I wanted to ask, do you how do you explain to somebody, a lay person, the connection between environmental justice and social justice and criminal justice, and how do you make those connections?
Um, well, okay, we'll start with environmental justice, and that got to talk about some of the environmental injustices happening in our state here in West Virginia. Um, when I was in college, I did a short internship with a class action law case in Logan, West Virginia. Um, there were 700 families um, taking Massey Coal Company to court because Massey Coal Company at the time, their CEO, Don Blankenship, thought it was a good idea to take, how do you say this? It was millions of gallons of toxic sludge slurry. So because, just to give you a little bit more background, because of the Clean Air Act, what they started doing was washing coal. Like with this chemical solution to like try to pull the toxins out of the coal so that when it burns cleaner in the air. But the byproduct of that is millions of gallons of toxic sludge slurry. So what
Sounds
the
appealing.
problem, yeah, so the problem becomes more localized in West Virginia. And what do they do with it? It's just this, it's this huge problem where they decided to instead of what they were supposed to do legally is put it in these like lined retainer containment holes, and instead what they did was they pumped it down into old abandoned coal mining shafts underneath people's well water. So the water coming into these people's homes was brown. There were children getting kidney stones, cancer. All of these families had health repercussions. They were poisoned by this coal company, and this is just one example of shortcuts and ways that these coal corporations have just been flat out greedy and callous and not cared about the communities that they were operating in.
Which communities
Um,
were hit the hardest?
so this was in Logan, West Virginia. That particular, but the coal fields, to be clear, the coal fields, and it's hard to have this conversation because coal goes back in West Virginia history for so long. And a lot of families really relate to it. My dad, my grandpa was, not me specifically, but a lot of people feel like, because I have this lineage of coal miners, they want to hold on to that tradition, and it will always be an important part of West Virginia history. However, we have to not overlook the abuses of the CEOs and the coal barons. Actually, a lot of West Virginia history is the coal miners fighting against the coal barons. Sorry, we're getting all sidetracked. You were asking about social justice, so this
Well,
helps.
how
This
you
is
connect environmental justice to criminal justice, and I
right,
think your story does that quite well. What's
right.
the income like, or not the income, but the average, I guess, average family income in Logan, West Virginia? I-
Um,
Is it
I'm not exactly sure the specific number. I would say that the number coal jobs has been decreasing significantly since the 70s, especially over the past 10 years. Coal jobs themselves pay well. The reason why they pay well is because the labor movement started here in West Virginia with coal miners.
Um, so the decline of coal has seen a bit of a comeback, but um, over the years, we've shifted away from coal to other energy sources, and we've also seen a decline in the strength of labor. Uh, it's interesting in West Virginia. How the unions? How much power did they retain? I mean, as a political force in West Virginia.
I would say that the unions are still pretty strong here. There's constantly attacks against that.
You're a supporter of labor.
Yes, I definitely support unions and their role. It's interesting. The just if you get some time, look at the history of the labor movement in West Virginia, because they actually did fight battles against the coal companies, and the National Guard was actually brought in at some point and fought against the miners. So the labor movement did start here, and as far as modern day unions, it's still an important factor, but it's something that is always under attack. So yeah, all I'll say is I support unions.
Well, West Virginia is a right to work state. Would you do you think that law should be reversed or repealed?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the right to work, I think a lot of that framing is misleading.
You don't say. So for people who are unfamiliar, a right to work law means that employees of unionized workforces, people in unionized workforces, do not have to pay union dues. And West Virginia is one of the states that has one of these laws on the books, which unions argue weakens their power because they don't have as much money to fight. And obviously, unions are at a disadvantage against big corporations who have all of this money to throw into political battles. Speaking of, you want to repeal Citizens United. Can you tell me, as somebody who's running for Congress and seeing a sort of another side of politics that maybe we don't see, can you tell us how that has affected your commitment on this issue, on getting money out of politics?
Yes. So I've pledged to not take corporate money, and I'm a part of this movement in West Virginia called West Virginia Can't Wait, started by Stephen Smith, who's running for governor, and he's had over 90 candidates around the state of West Virginia to sign this pledge to not take corporate money. And I think that's a good start, considering where we are. I think you see a lot more congressional candidates around the country saying, let's not take corporate money. And that's great if we can elect those people. But I think ultimately the goal should be to change our laws and to have serious election reform, where we really limit what lobbyists are allowed to do.
Do you think that right now contributions to direct contributions to candidates and campaigns are limited, but because of a decision from 1976, Buckley versus Vallejo decision, money spent on outside causes, maybe outside groups, they can spend as much money as they want, and wealthy individuals can spend as much money as they want. And the court argued that basically a direct contribution should be limited, because if somebody gives you a ton of money and you're a politician, that could be seen as influence peddling. But if they're not directly giving to you, if they're just spending on, say, an issue ad um, that happens to benefit you, that's not the same thing. That doesn't have the same potential for corruption. Do you think that we need limits on all political spending by individuals and corporations?
Yes, I do think so. I think it's crazy how, billionaires can just come in and even self-fund their own campaigns by millions of dollars. I think that's an issue as well.
People like
Um,
Mike Bloomberg,
exactly. Uh, yeah, that was a really crazy thing to see. Him
right?
just come on stage and, try to steal the presidential election with his money.
Right, he just bought his way and somebody who, I don't know how you feel about this, but I was watching it. I'm like, this guy does not belong on a presidential debate stage. Like, he's unprepared, and B, he's got the charisma of a potato. I mean, this
Right. I
is
felt like he just like crashed and burned on he won one debate. I mean,
so. Obviously, this is not a great year for progressives. The presidential race has seemingly gone to Joe Biden for the nomination, and that means that November will likely be a Joe Biden versus Donald Trump uh, race. You're shaking your head. Why are you
I don't
shaking your
quite want to see that race.
head?
It's a little concerning. I'm not sure if Joe would be able to carry a state like West Virginia, where Bernie does really well here. I think Bernie could carry West Virginia.
But he did win the primary. I mean, this is the question, right? Like, Biden, for progressives, I think, at least, Biden has done well in states that you need to do well in.
That's true. Right.
Um, at the same time, he's I, accused of sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
He's visibly cognitively diminished. Um,
Right.
and
That's why I don't want to see this race happen, just because I'm like, this is gonna get so
does that
messy.
scare you? I mean, does it
It is
scare you?
scary. It is scary to
It's a little
me.
scary, right?
I almost feel like, everybody's acting like, and this might be a controversial thing to say, but I feel like everyone's acting like this is like just a done deal, like Joe Biden's just, it's over, it's a done deal. And I'm like, can't somebody come in and help us? Like, or like, can we just maybe redo something? Can we try redo? Like,
What do you think of the fact that the party held primaries against CDC recommendations, and they're low turnout primaries, obviously? And I mean, you do think that there is room for somebody else, that there's an argument to be made that maybe we need to take a step back and wind some things back.
I feel like if the Democratic Party were really wise, they would think really hard about the direction that they want to take. And yes, I do think that there's room to take a step back and to think about this really critically, and about, because it's scary. A lot of people, I don't see Joe being able to build a lot of momentum
You
behind
think his
him. He's
digital
struggling.
strategy hasn't appealed to you?
Not to me particularly.
As a woman running for office, um, how would you feel about running with Joe Biden as the top of your ticket, in light of the allegations made by Tara Reid?
It honestly makes me uncomfortable. I think there's a lot of things about our political system that have become very uncomfortable. But that particular, I was really hoping that Bernie would be at the top of the ticket. I would also be really happy with Warren being at the top of the ticket. Just having a progressive that could speak to the needs here in West Virginia, especially, and really excite young voters to come out and vote. I was hoping for that because I'm also a young candidate. But aside from that, just on a basic moral issue, you know, if this whole thing didn't come out and if it didn't happen, you know, I I believe Tara Reid, but you know, if this whole thing didn't happen, it was just that there was a centrist running, I would say, let's just try to do our best, you know. But now it becomes that much more uncomfortable. But I feel like the only choice I have is like, okay, I've gotten into this and I've committed to this, and I've got to keep pushing forward. And if I do go into Congress, maybe we can change things. But it's at the same time, this is why one of the reasons why I respect AOC so much is she came into Congress under Trump, and she didn't seem to let that stop her from trying her best every day, you know, to push for justice. But I don't feel like, I feel like it would be hard for the Democrats to unify the party, to bring in the progressives and the moderates to say, you know, like let's try to compromise and like work past our differences and produce legislation that helps people. It's a lot harder to do that when you have just like this glaring elephant in the room.
So you would have a hard time endorsing Joe Biden as as a candidate running. If you secure the nomination, you would have a hard time running with Joe Biden at the top of the ticket.
I would say that on one hand, it makes it a lot more challenging. It would make my race more challenging if he's at the top of the ticket, and at the same time, yes, it makes my race more uncomfortable. And I would literally, and there are a lot of people saying this online, and I would have to repeat this, that, you know, it would be like choosing the lesser of two evils. When you have two men at the top of the ticket that have both been accused, both have credible accusations. I think Tara Reid's accusations are credible.
It does seem that way. It does seem like every day there's new, or at least for the last week, there's been, more and more evidence that corroborates her claim there.
Right.
There are multiple individuals who say that she told them over the years, including one person who says that she told them immediately after it happened, in the immediate aftermath. There's the video of her mother calling into Larry King Live saying that her daughter was having problems at a prominent senator's office. Now there's a court document from her ex-husband attesting to trauma that she faced, or that she was dealing with as a result of harassment at working in Biden's office. And while while there is no smoking gun, there's no signed sworn statement that Joe Biden sexually assaulted her. These things do start to paint a picture that either harassment or assault happened. In both cases would be should be in the wake of Me Too, I think, for people on the left at least, should be disqualifying. And so, yeah, I mean, that's understandable that you have a difficult time with Biden at the top of the ticket, especially because you're the only woman running in your race.
Right.
So, and obviously, that comes with a whole. It's one thing for male men to look at Biden and say this is bad, but on the other hand, like being a woman with a man who is credibly accused of sexual assaults at the top of the ticket, that seems It seems like a different method.
It's bizarre. I feel like we are living in bizarre times,
You don't
and
say.
yeah. And I don't know what the solution is. Like I said, I think that it would be really wise for the Democrats to consider the direction that they're heading in. And when I say they, I mean, like I guess the top of the party, who seems to have so much sway over, the Democratic primary process. They seem to, influence a lot of sway in kind of thwarting Bernie's campaign. I think they did that really successfully.
They did. I
Um,
think a lot of people did not, myself included, did not think they had that much um, fight in them. And I think arguably there's good justification for that. I don't think we've ever seen them fight this hard. As at least in, I'm 31, I'm almost 32 years old. In my lifetime, I've never seen Democrats fight this hard. And it did sort of come out of nowhere, but they pulled it off, and God bless them, they got their guy at the top of the ticket, and now they it does seem like they're in a bit of a pickle.
right. And I wonder, I kind of wonder what the mental processes, emotional processes of like this realization, like it's kind of like having to put your foot in your mouth, but um, I, at what point is it, at what point do you put your personal interests aside and think about, the good of the country?
That's a good question. And that's a good question. I think a lot, and I think a lot of people are asking themselves that right now. Like, I think a lot of people on the left are asking themselves that. Like, can I vote for this man? Obviously, I want to get Trump out of office. Um, his response to the coronavirus pandemic has been, I think, incompetent, to say the least. Borderline incompetence, bordering on maliciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the aid has not, and maybe we can get into this, but the aid is stalled. It's not, it doesn't feel like there is help coming for a lot of people in this country, millions and millions of people in this country. And that's not just Trump's fault, um, but it is partly Trump's fault.
Right.
So a lot of people on the left now have to deal with this. Do we support Biden, which he's promising to entrench people like Pete Buttigieg, and he says bring in the next generation of Democrats. I don't know about you, but as a millennial, I don't feel particularly represented by Pete Buttigieg.
I don't either.
It's unsurprising considering that young people did not really like Pete Buttigieg. Um,
Right.
but I mean, what do you say? What do you say to progressive voters who are considering sitting out this election? Um,
Whew, that's a hard one. I would say, go vote with your conscience, but at the same time, um, we have to think about the real repercussions of our vote. If come November, if Biden is on the top of that ticket, I would say that I would have to vote for him, and that would just simply be a vote against Trump. And it would simply be the fact that as many issues as I've had with Biden, and as many other candidates that I think would do a better job. Just the fact that he even acknowledges climate change and says we've got to work on this publicly, to me, that's huge. And while he might not be as progressive as I want him to be on fighting climate change, at least my perspective is that he's acknowledging that we have to work on it. So if we can get a really progressive Congress, and push progressive legislation and push, just keep pushing, at least we have more of a chance of going in a better direction, instead of Trump is taking us way down a road that we do not want to go on. At least with Biden, we have a shot of pushing him towards, starting to move in a better direction, and hopefully kind of pulling things together down the road.
So it would be a vote without an endorsement.
At this point, I would say that I'm not sure exactly how things will play out down the line. But I would like to see some conversations about addressing the current accusations against Joe, and I would like to see conversations around what do we do in this case, and considering other options. I would like to see that happen.
Is that what accountability looks like to you? Is Joe Biden stepping aside?
Yes, and and people in the party being willing to take this seriously and not just sweep it under the rug.
So let's move off of presidential politics, because you are running for Congress, and that is a federal race. That's an important race. Mm-hmm. If you got elected, you would add to a growing number of progressives in Congress, real progressives in Congress, not just the people who are in the Progressive Caucus. Mm-hmm. Do you think there has been what do you make of the Democratic response to Donald Trump from Speaker Pelosi from the House? Do you think that there is enough opposition, that they're fighting hard enough for people in your district?
I don't think that a lot of the members of Congress are aware of much that is happening in my district at all. So no.
Okay, short and sweet. Do you think there's enough opposition to or pushback from the progressives in Congress on Speaker Pelosi and the sort of relief? Because there was an article that came out the other day that was sort of Pelosi is managing the deal making with Republicans and giving legislation to the rest of the House while they're in recess, and sort of that's how we're dealing with this. So do you think there's been enough pushback on Pelosi from the progressives in Congress, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and some of my favorite people in Congress?
I would say that there could be more pushback, and I would say that I kind of have a problem with there being so much power placed on one person in Congress. And maybe we can look at, how do we enliven this conversation with more voices?
So as a freshman member of Congress, you would not have a ton of power. Right. Committee assignments are handed down, and I think, obviously this is sort of the power play inside. Would you feel comfortable standing up to that power structure and, so even if it costs you a committee assignment, if it costs you, like, would you feel comfortable being a voice that dissented if it meant that you had less actual power in the chamber?
That's a really good question. I don't have a problem standing up to people, and speaking out and speaking my mind. I would have to play those situations carefully, because there are some issues that I really would like to work on. And some of my background, just to let you know, I've been a yoga teacher for a long time. I don't know if you knew that. I've worked a lot of different jobs. I've been a teacher. I've also been
yoga
a yoga
scares
teacher.
Me.
Yoga scares you?
My fiance wants me to get into it, and I'm not a flexible. physically flexible person.
Don't let it scare you. When I also played soccer growing up, so that's where I feel like I have this very competitive side. And then in college, I really started yoga, and I couldn't touch my toes. But pretty soon, you progress quickly if it's just like anything, just regular practice. And the biggest thing is just being patient with it and like letting it, watching the progress, not trying to push it.
Okay, good to know.
But I
As
would
someone who
say
cannot touch their toes.
that now I can touch my toes, but when I started, I couldn't. Um, and but I would say that so it's kind of I think it's important to be able to pick your battles, and also know when to kind of keep your peace of mind, and also know when to be diplomatic. So I think that I'm a pretty diplomatic person. I'd rather handle issues with people in person and say let's talk this out, rather than just getting angry and like making a big stink and trying to make them mad for and create enemies for no reason. So I think it's important. I would think if I was in Congress that it would be important to try to work with the people that were there to the best of my ability, but to also stand up for what I believe in.
So one of the things that we are sort of seeing, I guess, is that navigating the game means at some point, uh, drawing lines in the sand. So you would
Mm-hmm.
have no problem doing that at a certain point.
Right. I feel like if my heart was completely, in something saying, this is right, I feel like I'd have to go with my heart.
So on the Green New Deal, for example.
Right. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, if something's going to hurt the people, if something's going to hurt America, if something's going to hurt our future, and, I'm going to have to speak against it. And to the best of my ability, I would have to have vision for what's going to help us, what's going to actually help us navigate our problems that we have, and head in a better direction, and speak for that. And I think there's ways to do that non-violently. So that's an aspect of yoga, is nonviolent communication. So to speak to
To be
people.
clear, when we say violence, we're not talking about Molotov cocktails in the streets.
Right.
We're talking
To
about
speak to people, like not in a way that like attacks them personally, but in a way that is just makes just make a sound argument.
um, so the last thing I want to circle back to before I let you go, and thank you for taking the time and speaking with me, is how are you holding up in all of this, in the
Um,
crisis and everything?
I would say that this is a difficult situation, and there's definitely been some really difficult days, and sometimes I've definitely gotten pretty stressed out through running for office, and grappling with all the anxieties, and all the issues that we're all facing. um, some I know I keep reminding myself that it could be a lot worse, and I know a lot of people are really struggling, and so I keep trying to remind myself that you know I have food, and my family's taken care of at this point, and just trying to stay grateful for that, and um, trying to connect in with keeping a peaceful mindset. It can be difficult.
So what are some of the things you do to like relax or take blow off stage? Do you watch shows and whatnot? I mean, that's big around these parts. The Netflix and
I think at first when this whole thing happened, I was like really overwhelmed, and I think I watched some shows, and but I taking a walk outside is really good. But I will say that I really feel for people in New York City right now, not having as much access to nature. I mean, I live in a neighborhood with a lot of trees. So if I go for a walk, it's a lot easier for me to just step into a place that is really peaceful and relaxing. I don't know. Are you going to Central Park?
I mean, so I live in Brooklyn, so it's not Central Park. I mean, the closest park to me is Prospect. Um,
Right,
but no, we're trying to do our part and stay inside as much as possible. And
right,
I think
right.
the biggest adventure I've had is stepping out to my car. And
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, it was dangerous and risky. Wore a mask, wore gloves, got into the car, and just was like, "This feels right. I want to go for a drive somewhere." And then realizing if I move my car, I might lose my parking spot because there's no more alternate side parking where like Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 a.m. Like 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. you can't be in the spot. So everybody can just park anywhere now and just
Wow.
occupy the spot. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, no, that's life in Brooklyn is difficult. It's not great. uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, but as a mother, you're getting outside. You're getting you and your child are getting enough sunlight and nature and
Yeah.
whatnot.
We definitely get outside. And I would say, might be worth the risk, get in your car and drive for a couple hours to a nature trail and go for a walk. It's really therapeutic.
Yeah, but it sounds it. So, Hilary Turner, thank you so much for taking the time and speaking with me about important issues, about nonsense as well, and
You're welcome.
hopefully we'll do this again before your primary. The primary is on June 9th. It is still scheduled to go forward. Um, can people find absentee ballots or a link to get absentee ballots on your campaign website?
That is not currently on our campaign website, but we should add it. Thank you for that recommendation.
Oh,
We can add that to our website.
well, then you're
For
welcome.
West Virginia, you can go to the Secretary of State's website of West Virginia and request an absentee ballot.
And where can people find more information on you?
My website is turnerforcongresswv.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck, and to your opponents, if they end up watching this video, I'm more than happy to have them on as well. Uh, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you so much, Walker.